Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking all about overcoming associate chiropractor resistance to marketing. I'm going to talk about strategies to help you empower your entire team to be engaged in the marketing so that you can accelerate practice growth. Now, if you're listening to this episode and you don't have an associate, then everything I'm going to talk about today would be equally as relevant if you have a chiropractic assistant, okay? So ideally, the best implementation of marketing happens when the entire team is involved, not just the chiropractor. So if you're just a chiropractor and a CA, your CA should be and could be engaged in your marketing, and the effectiveness of it will skyrocket when you have everybody involved. Now, one of the big challenges that chiropractors reach out to me all the time with is that they have difficulty engaging their associate chiropractors and getting them on board when it comes to their marketing. And they try many things, all to no avail. Now, we've had this challenge too. I've had many associates that I've employed over the past 25 years, and so I'm not new to it. So I'm going to share some of the strategies that we've used to really successfully engage our chiropractors in their marketing, okay? Now, here's the first thing that we've realized is it needs to be an expectation. When we employ a chiropractor, from day one, we let them know that this is not something that will be nice for them to do, but it's an expectation. In fact, we now have it written into their contract that to create one piece of social media content each and every week, so a video. And in fact, in the employment process in the past, I've even had associate or potential associate chiropractors create videos before they've even started. I've had them as a part of their, employment process. To weed out some of those people that I don't think will be good is that they've actually sent in their application over video. And so at our practices, this is just something that it's done. It's a requirement. It's expected from day one. Now, I realize for many of you, if you've not made that expectation from day one, if it's not written down clearly, then getting somebody to start to do something that wasn't agreed on in the early days can be a challenge, okay? But far from impossible. But we've realized is that, again, the first step is actually making it a requirement. Now, the next thing after this is there is a default when associates aren't engaging in the marketing, that they're lazy or that they're not interested or something like that. The first thing we've got to do, because rarely is it that, has been my experience. And so after we've got it into the contract there too, the next thing that we've got to do is we need to understand the resistance. And this might be the most important thing when it comes to overcoming the resistance to marketing, is knowing why. Why are you not wanting to do it? And my experience is there's probably three major resistances that associates have to doing the marketing. And the first is the same, not only for associates, but for chiropractors across the board. And it's a lack of confidence in their marketing skills. So if you've got a new graduate, although they might have skills with being on social media, it doesn't mean that they have the skills of actually marketing on social media. So here's some things to think about when we want to overcome that resistance as well. The first is we just need to provide training. So we need training sessions, workshops, resources, marketing concepts. We need to help them with content creation, social media management. You might want to consider bringing in a guest speaker, giving them books, pointing them towards this podcast, all of those type of things as resources. So if it's a lack of confidence, then it's training that they need. We want to encourage gradual exposure. So you can't expect them to go from never having created marketing content before to all of a sudden, going flat out. So start slowly. Encourage the associates to start small by participating, low risk marketing to begin with. Okay. Now it could be, just little pieces of content. If they're creating a video, it might be just a very short video. We'll talk about kind of creating a team with this a little bit later on, but gradual exposure as well. Mentorship. Again, this is one of the big mistakes, not only in marketing, but it's in practice in general, is that what happens is when the chiropractor brings an associate on board, we abdicate everything rather than delegating it. We just give it to them and say, listen, sort all this out and go for it. But what we need to do is we need to mentor them through this. And so in the early days in our practice, when we have an associate come on board and we're wanting them to create videos, then this is something that we do together. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on also. Make sure that we have a really super supportive environment. So foster open communication, make sure you acknowledge one of the things that we want to do whenever there's a resistance there is acknowledge it as real. Instead of saying, listen, I thought that you were a Gen Z, that you should be good at this stuff, and really it's no big deal, just make some videos. We want to acknowledge that there's fear about lack of training. Certainly here in Australia, there's a lot of fear by the younger chiropractors about not wanting to get in trouble with regulatory bodies. So acknowledge that, okay? So these are things. So, training, gradual exposure, mentorship, create a supportive environment. These are all solutions to address the lack of confidence. So one of the major resistance is just a lack of confidence. Now, the second major resistance is there's actually a fear, whether it's a fear of failure, a fear of rejection, a fear of public scrutiny, or even a fear of negative feedback. A lot of chiropractors are really scared that they're going to create some content and get some negative feedback. And so here's some solutions in around that. The first is that we want to set some realistic expectations, okay? So we want to educate our associates about the inevitability of the occasional bit of negative feedback. Now, it is inevitable, but it happens very rarely. And so, of all the chiropractors that I coach, about 2 or 3% of them, 5% of the year, that's some numbers there too. 80% of the time I'm right all of the time. There's an Anchorman reference for you there. But again, it is going to happen, but it's really, really rare. So we need to acknowledge, first of all, yes, you occasionally get some negative feedback, and here's how we go about dealing with it. So in my case, depending on what the feedback is, I look at the feedback and say, is this the type of feedback that you would give me face to face? Is this how normal, healthy individuals, if somebody wants to openly and reasonably debate me about a concept, about chiropractic and its safety, about chiropractic and kids, about chiropractic and its effectiveness, and they reach out in an inquiring, fascinated, curious way, then I'm happy to engage in that. But if it's not how we would act or interact with people in normal society, then I'm very quick. I delete and I block. I have no room for this space. Very few people are open to, really good, frank discussion on there. There's lots of weirdness that happens on social media, but occasionally I'll get somebody that's genuinely interested. Can I have more information? So again, if there is a fear around that public scrutiny, negative feedback, fear of failure, and fear of rejection, then set realistic expectations. Develop some resistance strategies, okay? So you want to prepare them in advance, discussing how do we kind of push this to the side. Not everybody is going to like you, and that's totally okay. We don't need everybody liking us. Again, another thing to do with this too is highlight all the success stories. Is there going to be some negative? Yes, that's life. This is what happens. But here's all the success stories. Here's the lives that we're changing. Here's the number of people that we're reaching out to. Again, just to go back to it, it's reasonable now with a good social media strategy for you to be reaching in excess of 100,000 people each and every month, okay? And it can be a lot more than that depending on the area that you're in. And again, with that, if you're going to be reaching out to 100,000 people, and let's just say that there are, 1,000 nutters in amongst that too, just 1% there too, then it might seem like there's a lot of craziness going on there, but the numbers are still relatively slow, okay? Make sure that you're also providing support as well. Encourage them to express their fears and not to feel like they're not being validated, like we talked about before. The third big the third big resistance that chiropractors have, there's just associates, is just a time constraints, okay? Busy schedules, or they feel like they're busy. This is often the case. We have associates that are working 3 days a week and they don't have any time to be creating videos. And so again, we need to prioritize how important this is. We need them to understand that this is part of what's needed, that good marketing allows us to reach more people in our community. It's actually a community service. That's very much the way that we talk about it in our practice, is that marketing is a community service. We want to teach good time management techniques. So teach them how about setting aside dedicated time when they're not trying to multitask, time that they're really clear on what their outcomes are also. So we want to simplify the best that we can. We have our CAs heavily involved in our marketing, and so therefore our associates don't need to do everything. They need to come up with the content, and our CAs can help with that too. We can help with that. They can delegate along the way. One of the important things, certainly in the early days too, is to emphasize quality over quantity. Again, we want one video from our associates each and every week, and we want it to be a good video. It doesn't have to be 10 minutes long. In many cases, it's 90 seconds. But we find that, depending on how many team members we have on at the time, we've got 3 great chiropractors at the moment, one off on maternity leave. If we're getting 3 videos out each and every week, along with the other supportive content, then that's more than enough for us to be reaching our community. So again, let's go back. The first thing, if you're wanting your associate engaged and involved and empowered in your marketing is you need to find out what is the resistance that's actually holding them back there too. Is it, first of all, just a lack of confidence in their marketing skills? Is it a fear of public scrutiny, a fear of negative feedback? Is it time constraints? Once you've identified what the resistance is, then you can provide the solutions like I talked about here, okay? Now, the second thing that we do to get our associates on board is that we need to educate them about the importance of marketing. This is different about having a lack of confidence in marketing that I mentioned earlier. They might not understand the importance of it. In fact, for me, in the early days as a new graduate, I thought marketing was one of those things that chiropractors did that weren't very good at what they did, so that we should be able to build our practice by word of mouth alone. And many times this is somehow subconsciously kind of drilled into us. And so we need to let our associates know that no, marketing is one, it's not just about growing our practice, but it is about community education, it is about community service. And I want them to know that part of your role, or our role as principal chiropractors to associates, is to show them the full gamut of what happens in a chiropractic practice, and that marketing is one of the things that needs to happen. You want to be constantly sharing the success stories of people that you reach through marketing. We might tell stories of, if we look here at Jo, for instance, that, she came from the Facebook strategy that we did last month. And if it wasn't for her, she wouldn't have found chiropractic, and now she's not having migraines anymore. And now she's bringing her kids in. The kids weren't sleeping through the night. And that this is what marketing does. Marketing changes people's lives. It is a community service. And so you need to, in many cases, because for lots of people still, when we think about marketing, we think about sleazy, pushy salespeople. Marketing is not that. It doesn't have to be that at all. Marketing is really solving people's problems. So the third thing, if you're wanting to get your associates or your entire team on board, is to develop a marketing training program. So we have a training program that walks our associates through how they're to care for kids, how they're to do their report of findings, how they're to do their initial consultation, their re-exams, all those things. But we also have many training sessions on how to create a video, how to structure it, how to post it, all those things we have for our CAs and for our associates also. So you would want to be sharing things like content creation techniques, best practices for social media, personal branding and storytelling, how to handle online feedback and criticism. You'd want to be constantly offering ongoing participation and support. So remember, most chiropractic colleges don't provide any form of marketing training at all. We get the basics on everything else with regards to how to be a chiropractor, but when it comes to running a business and community outreach, we don't get any of that. And so in the same way, hopefully you have an office manual that talks through here's how to answer the phone, then you should be putting together an office manual with the marketing that you want done, okay? Or at least providing resources to point them in that direction. Step number 4 is develop a collaborative marketing strategy. So this was really evident to me in the early days. One of my favorite people in the world and one of my longest associates, Dr. Kirby Collins, when Kirby worked for me, she had a real fear of making videos in the early days. And so what we did is we made videos together. So instead of Kirby just being in them, we would be in them together. And what we did in the early days is we made live videos, because although live videos can be scary in some ways, it's done. There's no editing. They're allowed to be a little bit more kind of naturally organic in feel. And we worked this out. We kind of worked our way through the entire body. So we started from ankle and then we went to knee and hip. And what we would do is we would alternate. So I would do a whole bunch of research on the ankle. I'd talk about some of the common problems that people might come in with, and then we would talk about solutions and how chiropractic would help with that. These live videos were anywhere between kind of 10 and 15 minutes long. And Kirby and I would just kind of dialogue and talk about it. And then the next week she would pick the knee and she would do all the research, and I would ask her questions. Now, obviously, we would have an understanding of this, but one of us would prepare for it, and we were doing it together. So it was a lovely collaborative feel. And if someone was a little bit nervous in front of the camera, or Kirby was at that stage, my confidence was able to rub off because it just felt like we were having a conversation. And so in the early days, rather than expecting them to do the social media by themselves, then do it together, okay? A collaborative approach can be great. So encourage teamwork and open communication. And it looks really great too from a practice point of view when there's multiple of you showing up on the videos together. So don't think for one moment that it should be just one of you. Now, it can look a bit awkward if there's two of you in the video and the other person is sitting next to you kind of, a bit stunned and not saying anything. So you want to really encourage conversation. Kirby and I had to work with that in the early days because some of our videos, I'm naturally confident on video. I'd be off talking and Kirby would be just sitting next to me like, why is that other person there? They're not involved in it. So make sure that there is a dialogue that's happening. So a collaborative marketing approach is great, particularly in the early days to build confidence, okay? The fifth and final thing that I want to talk about here is making sure that you are recognizing and rewarding efforts. So do you have a system in place for recognizing the great work that your associates do and just acknowledging them, reaching out with a little message, hey, listen, I saw that video you made last week. It's amazing. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for all that you do there too. Again, maybe you want to put some incentives in around it, okay? So paying for a seminar, a bunch of flowers, paying for dinner out for them. What is that person's love language and how can you incentivize that? Now, if they get really great at their marketing and they're allowing your practice to reach more people, then it's reasonable that you might want to incentivize that as well. So you should be in your practice cultivating a culture of appreciation and acknowledging people for their hard work. It's interesting. One of the things that we want to be, inside our workplace is that we want to be seen. We want to be acknowledged for the work that we're doing. It doesn't mean that we always need to be financially acknowledged for it. Just genuinely reaching out to somebody and acknowledging them for the great work that they're doing. These strategies here will all help you to empower your associates and to bring them on board so they are a key person. There's nothing, it's a wonderful feeling when you have an entire team that's marketing your practice and it's not all left to you as the practice owner. So let's just quickly review those as well. The first step is build it actually into the contract as an expectation that happens. And this means it's an expectation for you as well, okay, for everybody on the team. Somebody doesn't get to sit out on this too. The second is make sure you understand the resistance. There are many different resistances, but they tend to come under these three categories: a lack of confidence, a fear of failure or rejection there too, or a lack of time, okay? Provide solutions once you've worked out what the resistance is, acknowledge it and start to work with them to find steps that they can move through that, okay? The next thing that you need to do is educate them on the importance of marketing, okay? Marketing is something that a small business has to do. It's the lifeblood of a business. The second or third now we're up to there too is develop a marketing training program that walks them step by step. Make sure that you have, number 4 here is a collaborative marketing strategy. Be involved with them. Don't just leave them out there as an island. And then finally, recognize and reward the efforts of your associates when they start to come on board with this. These steps here will really help you create a wonderful marketing team. All right, folks, lots for you to implement. The more you do this, the more the people in your community will really benefit. And they need you. They really, really need you now more than ever. Thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you back here next week. Take care, folks. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.